Nobody believed Nora when she told them what her cat did. Every morning, he left a work glove at her door, worn, dirty, sometimes stained. But when she followed him, she realized this was never just about gloves. Nora found him on a Thursday evening in late October. She had just finished a double shift at the distribution center where she worked. She pulled up to her house, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a while, listening to the rain. Then she saw something under the front bumper. She crouched down on the wet asphalt. There was a cat, sat perfectly still beneath the front bumper of the car, soaking wet, impossibly thin, gray as ash, with one white ear and green eyes that did not blink. He did not run, just looked at Nora as if he had been waiting there patiently for quite some time, and was mildly disappointed it had taken this long for someone to arrive. "Hey," she said. "You lost, sweetie?" He did not answer, of course. She went inside and found leftover chicken in the refrigerator. She put it in a bowl and set it near the tire and stepped back into the doorway. He crawled out slowly and ate every single bite without rushing. Then he walked to her front door and sat down. That was that. She named him Remy. She still could not explain why, even later, even when people asked. He just looked like a Remy. Something in the way he held himself. Careful, self-contained, a little bit formal, like a person who is always aware of how they appear in a room. He slept on the left side of her bed, every single night, with a precision that suggested that spot had always been his, and she had simply not been informed about it until now. Each morning, Nora would open the back door, and Remy would slip out into the yard. He never dragged home dead mice, no trophies, no chaos. He did this every single day for a year. He was the most quietly attentive creature she had ever shared her life with. That was why the gloves were so deeply unsettling. The first one appeared on a Tuesday in February. Nora came downstairs in the morning and found it sitting by the front door. A single work glove. Old, canvas and leather, the kind used for serious outdoor work. Nora picked it up and turned it over. No name, no marking. She looked at Remy. He looked back at her with those pale green eyes. He sat with the posture of someone who had accomplished something important. "Where did you find this?" she asked. He blinked slowly and walked away toward the kitchen. Nora assumed it was a fluke, a one-time discovery. Maybe Remy had found it in the alley behind the street or dug it out from under a neighbor's porch. Cats find things. That is what cats do. She set the glove on the counter and forgot about it. The next morning, another glove, different from the first, smaller. It smelled of gasoline and something chemical she could not name. It sat in exactly the same spot by the front door, and Remy sat beside it with the same expression, patient, waiting, watching her face as she processed what she was seeing. She set it on the counter next to the first one. The morning after that, another. By the end of the first week, there were 6 gloves lined up on Nora's kitchen counter, all different, all old, all worn in ways that spoke of years of real work by real hands. Her neighbor Dolores came over to return a borrowed dish that Friday. She walked into the kitchen, stopped, and stared at the row of gloves. "What is all this?" she asked. "Remy keeps bringing them," Nora said. Dolores looked at Remy. Remy was sitting on top of the refrigerator, watching both of them with his usual expression, which was the expression of someone who is listening to a conversation they find mildly interesting, but will not be contributing to. "Cats bring mice," Dolores said carefully. "Birds, sometimes. I have heard of socks, not work gloves." "I know," Nora said. "Where is he getting them?" "I do not know." Dolores left with her dish and a thoughtful frown. That evening, Nora knocked on 6 doors on Callaway Street. She asked each neighbor if they had lost work gloves. She tried not to sound as strange as she felt asking. Everyone said no. Everyone gave her the same, slightly worried look. Before we continue with why Remy brings these gloves, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Now, back to the story. The second week began. The gloves kept coming. Every morning, one new glove, always by the front door, always with Remy sitting beside it like a small, gray guardian. On the 8th morning, Nora stopped looking only at the gloves and started looking at Remy. He would place the glove down, sit quietly beside it, and stare at the front door. Then his eyes would shift to her face. The door. Her. The door again. Her again. Like he believed that if he did it enough times, she would eventually understand what he meant. On the 9th day, she tried to follow him. She set her alarm for 5 and dressed quietly in the dark, watching him slip through the cat flap and cross the yard with purpose before disappearing through the hedge. Nora ran after him in her coat and boots, pushing through to the sidewalk on the next street. But he was gone. The road was empty in both directions. She stood there in the cold dark, breathing hard, and looked up and down at nothing. He was faster and quieter than she had any hope of matching in the early morning dark. "Where are you going every morning, Remy?" Over the next 3 days, 3 more gloves appeared. Each one was different. Each one was dirty, worn, stained, carrying the marks of rough work. Nora heard Remy come through the cat flap before dawn. She was already awake. She had barely slept. She heard him move through the kitchen and then stop at the front door. She came out of the bedroom and walked down the hallway. There he was, sitting beside the 12th glove. They looked at each other. 12 mornings, 12 different gloves, all worn and old. He had been making this trip every single day, selecting one object at a time and carrying it home. Nora had read once that cats bring things to the people they live with as a form of communication, as a way of sharing what they find, as a way of showing someone important something that matters. "Remy," she said quietly, "what is it? What are you trying to tell me?" He kept staring at the front door. With a quiet sigh, she stood, slipped into her coat, and pulled it open. Remy stepped onto the front porch and paused, as if making sure she was right behind him. He looked both ways down the morning street, the way a person looks before crossing. Then he turned left and began walking toward the end of Calloway Street. He walked. She followed. They reached the end of the street. Nora had walked this street hundreds of times in 6 years. She had never paid attention to what lay beyond the dead end, behind the chain-link fence. Next to the main building was a detached garage, separate from the main building. A metal roll-up door, dented and age-darkened, was pulled nearly all the way down to the ground. Almost. There was a gap at the bottom, maybe 8 inches, enough for a cat to slip under easily. Remy looked at her, then at the garage. Without hesitation, he padded to the door and slipped underneath, as if he'd done it 100 times before. She stood there for a moment, in the gray, cold morning. A light wind stirred the overgrown weeds along the fence, making a dry, papery sound. Then she crouched, gripped the bottom of the metal door, and pulled. It was heavy, shrieking along its rusted tracks, but it lifted enough for her to duck inside. The smell hit her first. Damp concrete, rust, old oil soaked deep into the floor, dust, aging wood. The scent of a place shut tight and forgotten. Thin gray light filtered through a cracked roof panel. As her eyes adjusted, shapes emerged. An old workbench against the far wall, pegboard above it with empty hooks, a rusted cabinet hanging open, stacks of lumber in the corner. And on the floor near the bench, scattered and loosely piled, as if left there over time, lay dozens of work gloves. The same kind Remy had been bringing her. She stared at them. 30 at least, maybe more. Some buried under a fine layer of gray dust, others newer, but all worn, all used. And then she heard it, from the corner, from somewhere behind the stacked lumber. A meow. So faint she thought at first she had imagined it. A small, thin, raspy sound, like the thread of something almost used up. She crossed the garage in 4 steps. She grabbed the top board of the lumber stack and pulled it aside, then the next, then the next. She kept pulling boards away and letting them fall behind her with hollow metal clangs against the concrete floor. In the gap between the lumber and the cinder block wall, a space about the size of a shoebox, was a kitten. It was tiny, 5 or 6 weeks old maybe. Gray, like Remy, but paler, lighter. It had gotten into the gap somehow, fallen from above, slipped through from somewhere, and it could not get back out. The space was just narrow enough that it could not turn around. The walls were smooth concrete with nothing to grip and nothing to push against. Nora lifted it out. It weighed almost nothing. She brought it up to her chest and held it there, this tiny thing, and she felt its heartbeat against her fingers. Behind her, Remy made a sound. She turned. He was sitting 2 feet away on the concrete floor, and then he made the sound again. It sounded like, "Yes, that is what I needed you to find." She looked at him. He looked back at her. For days, she had watched this cat bring her work gloves, confused, unsettled, wondering if he'd developed some strange, compulsive habit. She had knocked on neighbors' doors, searched online for explanations, and all along, he had been trying to lead her here. Nora brought the kitten home inside her coat, pressed against her chest. Remy walked the entire way beside her. At home, she made a nest of towels on the bathroom floor and set the kitten down gently. She got an eyedropper from the medicine cabinet and let it drink. Then she called the emergency vet line. By evening, the kitten had eaten a few small bites of wet food. By the next morning, it was moving around on the towel, investigating the edges of the space with the careful curiosity that is the exclusive property of kittens. Remy visited 3 times that first day. He would appear in the bathroom doorway, study the kitten for a moment, study Nora's face, and then leave again. Nora named the kitten Gus. She told herself she was not going to keep him. She told herself this seriously, with real intention. She had 1 cat. 1 was the right number. Nora wanted to find him a good family. She even composed the adoption listing in her head. Small gray male kitten, approximately 6 weeks, recovering well, gentle, and sweet. But she never typed it, because on the 4th day, when Gus had recovered enough energy to be genuinely and fully chaotic, she watched something happen in the kitchen that answered the question before she could finish asking it. Remy was half asleep on the kitchen rug, his tail moving slowly. Gus discovered the tail. He studied it from 3 feet away with the focused intensity of a military strategist. Then he launched himself at it with his entire small body, rolling and kicking and biting and producing tiny sounds of enormous aggression. Remy opened one eye. He looked at what was happening to his tail. He looked at it for a long, considering moment, the look of a very patient person deciding how to respond to an unreasonable situation. Then he lay down flat on the kitchen floor, completely on purpose, and let Gus attack his tail. That was the decision made. April came. Remy sat on the porch beside her, and Gus sat on top of Remy, attempting to use him as furniture in the specific, fearless way of kittens who have never been told they cannot. Remy allowed this. He allowed it every time. Nora looked at them both and thought about 12 gloves lined up on her kitchen counter. She thought about what it had taken to keep doing that for 12 days, to go back each morning to that cold garage, to pick up another glove, to carry it home and set it down and sit beside it and wait for someone who still did not understand. She thought about how close she had come to never following him. "I am sorry it took me so long," she said quietly. He just closed his eyes in response. Gus is 6 months old now. He is enormous for his age. He has the broad paws and oversized ears of a cat who is going to be very large and not at all aware of it. He operates in this house like a small natural disaster, enthusiastic and loud and constantly surprised by the consequences of his own actions. Remy tolerates this with extraordinary patience. There are no more gloves by the door. Everything that needed to be found has been found. Thank you for watching this story. If it stayed with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps and motivates me to keep sharing more stories you'll love.